Right, I'm very shocked. There's a lot to go through. Let's get into it. Basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload 3 videos. This video is focusing all around the Siege of the Atlas itself. The next video, we talk about the new league, Archnemesis. And the third, we're going over the patch notes. So make sure you check them all out. Again, this one's going to be all about Siege of the Atlas. So, to summarize, Zana has gone into exile. Kirac has now made a militia, and we're part of like an Atlas busting, protecting militia company. Band of Battle Brothers Exile. No. So, basically, there are 2 new big bad bosses. You have the Searing Exarch and the Eater of Worlds. For the rest of this video, I'm going to refer to them as the big red boss and the big blue boss, because that's simpler. Now, both the big red boss and the big blue boss has their own little mini boss underling, which I actually really like. I much prefer this system of having 2 new big bads with 2 slightly smaller bads, rather than the old system of a boss with 4 mini bosses. Now, we haven't seen the fights yet, but I'm hoping by having less fights, each fight will hopefully be of higher quality. And also a big thing that I've been trying to push for quite a long time now is bosses with crazier mechanics, which are then introduced to the player slowly. So, for example, you could introduce a mechanic in the mini red boss, which is then expanded upon in the big red boss. Now, we'll just have to wait and see, but hopefully that's the direction they're going with it. And also, hopefully, by having, 4 bosses total, rather than 2 big bosses, each with 4 mini bosses, the fights will be of a higher quality, and each one will feel, more special. One would hope. Now, these bosses are also introducing a whole new influence system, which I will go into slightly more detail on later. But I will say, as someone who previously did not like the influence system, I much prefer this direction of influence modifiers. There's been a complete overhaul of Atlas passives. We now have a full Atlas passive skill tree. There are no longer regions. There's just a big old Atlas, a big old skill tree with over 600 passives, 117 of which we can unlock. And you just get to spec your Atlas in any which way you want. And you no longer have the situation, if you want to do, for example, ritual content, you have to be in the region with ritual mods. We've also seen a complete overhaul of the favored map system. You can now unlock up to 12 favored map slots. And if you would like, you could just do 1 map favored 12 times for a massive boosted, I believe it was 120% modifier, meaning that something like 50% of all map drops would be just that one specific map. Obviously, this is a great thing for anyone who just likes one particular layout, or you're in a trade league and you're farming for div cards or whatever, or, just picking 12 different varied maps that you really like, or 6, or whatever, which combination, and kind of going from there. Very cool. So, there's no longer watchstones. That's also gone. There are now these things called void stones, 4 in total. Void stones upgrade the tiers of the maps on the new Atlas. If you have all 4 void stones, then every single map will be a tier 16. You get 1 from killing the big red, 1 from killing the big blue, 1 from Maven, and 1 from Uber Elder. As a brief aside, I do think it's interesting that they chose Uber Elder instead of Cirrus for that. Take from it what you will. Kind of makes sense because Elder was like the first introduction to these big Eldritch Horrors. So, it was like Elder is what then attracted Maven, which is then what attracted these new people. So it kind of makes sense. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the specifics. Now, one thing that I really like about the new Atlas system, and again, I've not been a big fan of Atlas as a system. So as someone who previously didn't like Atlas and didn't like Influence, for me to be quite positive about both, haven't played it, is a good sign. Hopefully, when I get my hands on it, I will still feel positive. Right. So one thing that I always found a bit kind of weird with the old Atlas system is it often felt like, it wasn't a fully realized system. It kind of felt at war with itself. In its first iteration, it was just this big old thing, and it's like, here, maps, run them. You're like, okay, I guess I'll just fill in the thing. And filling in the massive thing was kind of satisfying, and then you fought a boss at the end. Cool, I guess. Then we got the shaped meta, where you just run the same map over and over and over again, which felt quite stale. Then we had the Shaper and Elder influence mess. Then we had the Conqueror system, which in some ways felt like an improvement, in others it felt like a step back. Watchstones are always very messy to me. I didn't like that system at all. The most recent iteration of the Atlas felt good, but my main complaint was that a lot of it was backloaded in terms of reward. This was a big thing that we stressed in our 315 interview with Chris, that we would like more of the Atlas to be front-loaded in terms of passives and reward, because a big issue, something I experienced quite a lot, I'm sure it's quite common for some of you as well, is you can start playing and sometimes just the task ahead sometimes, you're just like, you know what, I don't know if I can even be bothered, because sometimes with PoE with the old systems felt like, you know, I've got to do like 100 hours or 200 hours or however many hours of Atlas to unlock the cool things so I can now start having fun. You know, it reminded me a lot of that like South Park thing of grinding boars in the forest for months and months and months, and it's like, what do we do now? Well, now we play the game. By the new system they have, they're front-loading a lot of the passives, meaning you shouldn't have that system of like, oh, I've got to do this massive slog for my Atlas to then start to become interesting. Your Atlas should start to become interesting much sooner by getting more passive sooner. And by removing the region system, you then don't have that awkward situation of being like, oh, do I only spec into, for example, Ritual, but now I'm tied to only running these layouts. You can now suddenly run whatever which layout you want, which is great. And also, briefly, just to pause the video, I much prefer this new layout of just everything being visible at once, and you start at the bottom and you work your way up. It's just a much cleaner system, just from like a visual, like I'm climbing up, rather than just like go everywhere with no real direction. So I like all of that a lot. One thing which is also worth noting, since we now have a 600 passive new skill tree, is Orbs of Unmaking, the like Atlas Regret Orbs, are now part of the core drop table, and their drop rate has been increased. Now, obviously, you're not going to do like a full respec, but when you have 117 points to play with, it should feel a little less punishing. And here you can see them uploading the 4 Void Stones. You can see all the tiers filtering up quite nicely. So that I all think is pretty positive. Now, one thing which I'm not 100% sold on, and we'll just have to wait and see, is the new, like, what do they call it? Influence system, or being like observed by. When you go to the actual map device, you pick, is Maven watching this one? Is the big red watching this one? Or the big blue watching this one? Now, because you just gain passives from everything, it's not a situation of the only way that you get passives is by Maven Witness. That's the thing, is by doing Maven Witness content. So you don't have that situation of this new whole endgame comes out and you're just having to focus on Maven only content for the first however many days. You can focus on doing the new stuff. You could ignore Maven completely for like a week and you're still progressing the skill tree. So it seems like a third of the skill points will be split between Maven stuff, big red stuff, big blue stuff, and probably a couple just from like clearing maps. Something sort of like that. So that's kind of interesting. One thing, are the POB guys going to do like an expanded one? Because I'm going to need a calculator for this. I'm going to need a POB for my Atlas tree. So that should be interesting. And then what, are these going to start getting masteries? Anyway, we're getting kind of ahead of ourselves. Very long story short, though, I do much prefer this new Atlas system. Just from the looks of things, it seems more interesting. And even if you're someone who isn't like crazy into just constantly mapping, by having a more meaningful engagement with how you spec your stuff, that makes it interesting to me. For me, I've always been most interested in planning Path of Exile, not playing Path of Exile. I often have more fun planning builds than playing the builds. But now I can have fun planning out my Atlas much more so than, you know, with the current system with Maven, it's like you have to make some choices, but it's like, oh, am I doing Legion stuff? Well, I take these nodes. Like, there's no choice there. If once you've decided you're doing Legion, you take the Legion nodes. Oh, you want to do the ritual stuff? You take the ritual nodes. Whereas now, when you've got this massive tree with all this scope, you need to really sit down and think, okay, what is my main priority? I like the Legion stuff, which is over here. I want the ritual stuff that's over there. I want this new scouting map system. What order am I going to do things in? How am I going to, weave through it? And that, I think, is really cool. And as someone who often kind of loses their direction in the mapping system or gets bored of the mapping system, I think that should be a really good thing to really kind of like hook me in. Now, one caveat is it will make the mapping system much more complicated and could possibly make it more overwhelming for new players, which is something we'll just have to see how good the introduction is through the new quest system. Okay, then. I guess we'll now talk about the new influence system, since that's currently what's up on my screen. And then I will circle back around and talk about the Kirac and the scouting maps, which is something that I'm actually also very much excited about. So as you can see here, the way the new influence works, the red influence and the blue influence, is unlike previous Conqueror items, or Elder or Shaper items, where they drop pre-influenced. The new influence is actually only in the implicits, and we add it through some new currency orbs. Now, these currency orbs have tiers, so you can drop a tier 1 orb, which can happen in any tier. So even if you're just doing like white tier maps, you can be getting meaningful influence items. You put it on, boom. Let's say you hit the fire damage multi on here. The maximum tier I think we saw was 25%. So, the difference in getting 15%, 25%, yeah, it matters. You want that extra 10 multi, but it's not going to break your build if you don't have it. So that's something I quite like. Now, you can have an item that's influenced by both red and blue, which is cool. So, you add your orbs on, cool, you get the mods you want, great. You can spam re-roll them as well, which is nice. Another thing which is cool about having this system where you add it to a pre-existing item and you add the implicit, it doesn't re-roll the item. So here with these gloves, he got a good pair of gloves, or she, or they, got a good pair of gloves. They add the thing on. Cool, right? This suddenly makes rare items much more interesting, much more meaningful, and that's often been my main complaint with the influence system, is the influence system of stuff dropping pre-influenced kind of rendered a lot of the core loot pool obsolete, which kind of sucked. So when they eventually do loot 2.0, this new influence system slots into it quite neatly. It's also worth noting, you cannot add this influence to unique items. Also, you cannot add influence to, for example, a white item and then chance into a unique. You can't do that. You also cannot add this influence to something with previous Conqueror, Elder, or Shaper influence. Doesn't work like that. Now, Maven drops a new orb, and what the orb will do is it will add a tier to 1, and it will increase the tier by 1 and lower the tier of the other. So let's say that you had a tier 4 red and a tier 4 blue. Use the Maven orb. The red goes up to 5. The blue goes down to 3. So that's kind of interesting. So there's a lot of shenanigans, and with this new system, Maven feels much more tied in directly to the other influence types, which I like. And it feels more meaningful than the Cirrus system of, oh, you can get double influenced if you get this one really rare drop just from the boss. That I've never been a big fan of double influence with the old system, but this whole system was made with double influence in mind, which I like. And again, it means that if you happen to get like a perfect rare item in like a white map, and you're in SSF, you got your amazing triple res life damage gloves, and you're like, I want to keep these gloves, you can keep them. It kind of gives you that harvest system, which I never liked harvest, but I understood why people liked it. This gear progression system, perfect on that level. 10 out of 10. So that's kind of the whole, sorry if it was overcomplicated, that's kind of the whole Eldritch implicit thing, right? Obviously, you want to get interesting new powerful uniques from the new bosses. We'll have to see how good they are. But I want to circle back to the Atlas passive skill tree and this one in particular. So this is an example of kind of things you'd have. Atlas scouting reports. You're like, what's an Atlas scouting report? So because Zana's gone, Kirac is the new person leading the militia. He's the one who's going to be handling all that Atlas stuff. They've introduced this new system called Atlas Scouting Reports, which you have some here. It re-rolls Kirac's missions. So with Zana, I know how you get like a daily, like with Alba, you do the daily with Zana. It's like go run a map, and it'll just be like do some stupid task, and you get some random favor, but favor doesn't matter anymore. With the new Kirac system, is you get his little inventory, and you can pick, like, so you had a red mission. You'll get a choice of like 5 red maps, and it might be like clear out the Legion, kill this Conqueror, do this other boss, you know, do this unique map, meaningful obstacle, right? Kill a Conqueror is a lot more interesting than click the statues, meaningful rewards. Cool. With these scouting reports, you can re-roll those missions as you want, and then get powerful outcomes. So this one gives you unique maps. This one means that you'll always get Breachstone missions. I think that's way cooler to be like, yo, go do a Breachstone, rather than click the statues, find the unique item, find the map item. So that I think is really cool. I'm very glad they've done that. And I feel like with that new system, it has more reason to exist. I was always quite frustrated with the whole Kirac and Zana thing, because it felt kind of unnecessary to me, because the Zana gameplay wasn't all that engaging, and the only reason they exist was they wanted an NPC to open portals for us. Whereas at least now, yeah, Kirac's just an NPC that opens portals and is like a lore thing, but now it's actually got some meaningful gameplay in there, which should be great. So that I'm very, very excited for. The level of chase, here's an example of a double influence item. Pretty cool. Yeah, when they say new powerful uniques, so one of the ones they've shown, which is going to be the main focus point, are these 2 jewels. So you get the red jewel and the blue jewel. The red jewel does nothing unless you have the corresponding matching blue jewel, and vice versa. The blue jewel does nothing unless you have the matching red jewel. You're like, oh, that seems difficult. So you have to have these 2 items that you can do anything. The reward's got to be really strong. The reward is very strong, and this is going to sound very complicated. So the red jewel will drop, and it will say, give you a random ascendancy node if you have a matching blue jewel, which gives you the same random ascendancy node. Yes. If you have both of these, you get ascendancy skill points. You're like, that sounds awesome. Wait, does that mean that, for example, I could get a cultist profane bloom on a gladiator or a pathfinder? No. You can only get ranger ascendancies on a ranger if you're playing a ranger. If you're playing a marauder, you can only get the marauder ascendancies. So you're like, okay, so like if I'm playing a juggernaut, then I get like another juggernaut node. I guess that's pretty strong, but you know, it's not that exciting. If I wanted it that much, I would have taken it anyway. Well, you can get any ascendancy node, assuming you've got the matching jewels, of the class you're playing. So you could suddenly be a Juggernaut and get a Berserker node. Or, for example, you could be playing an Elementalist and get Profane Bloom off a Cultist. Whew. Suddenly, the build possibilities are insane from this. Now, obviously, this is something that no one watching this video is going to get. This is going to be a very Trade League only thing. I'm never planning on having this stuff in SSF. Because if you think about it, there are 7 classes. So you've got to kill the boss, right? And these aren't going to be common. So you've got to kill the boss. You've got to get the rare drop. So let's say I'm playing a ranger and a marauder 1 drop. So obviously that does nothing for me. So maybe I make a marauder next. All right, cool. So then I kill the boss and I get another marauder 1. All right, awesome. But the first one was a berserker node. The second one was a chieftain node. You've got to get the right class drop and then the right node drop twice on the red gem and the blue gem. Having 2 matching blue gems does nothing for you. Having 2 matching red gems does nothing for you. It's very much a Trade League thing. But I think it's a very fun and cool chase system, and I think that's pretty neat. The other uniques all seem individually very fun and very interesting. Polaric Devastation. I actually thought this was a little bit underwhelming considering like the insanity of these 2. But yeah, you get covered in ash. Cool, and covered in frost, which is basically just ash but cold damage, and it lowers enemy crit instead of slowing them. This one I think is also very exciting. So you don't have any energy shield, But if you were to take 1,000 life, rather than losing 1,000 life, you reserve 1,000 life. Huh. And then if you don't take no damage, you get your life back. Interesting. Very interesting. And it gives you 25% more life. Huh. Really strong on like a very high avoidance kind of build. Very interesting the way this might interact with other mechanics like a recoup or something. Just a wacky little thing. And then this isn't all that interesting, but it's very powerful. So this gives you increased experience gain of gems. So this means this immediately has value in a trade league scenario when it comes to people who like run breachstones with 1,000,000 in powers equipped. Increased reservation, very strong. Running auras is like the best thing right now. Possible level of all skill gems. Obviously, I don't need to tell you that's strong. And then increased quality of all skill gems. Great for alternate quality gems, but especially, again, if you're leveling in powers, even more bonus XP. Awesome. So, basically, to summarize from all the crazy new Siege stuff, I dig it. As someone who doesn't like the Atlas, I like the look of this new Atlas. As someone who doesn't like influence items, I like the look of these new influence items. It takes a lot of my main complaints of both of these systems and kind of really focuses in. The only thing I'm a little bit iffy on is this whole like triple witnessing thing. I don't know if that might feel a bit stale in a while, where it's kind of like, oh, I'm only doing the blue, or I'm only doing this, or I'm only doing that. Saying that though, I quite like target farming, and I like the fact that as an SSF player, if I know specifically I want Maven rewards, I can focus on doing the Maven witness stuff. If I want the blue rewards, I can focus on that. Like, let's say that I've got my perfect pair of red gloves. I've farmed a bunch of the blue rewards. I've gotten the blue orbs. I've added the perfect blue influence. All right, cool. I now want the red influence. We'll focus on doing a bunch of red stuff for a couple of days. And now I've got that. Awesome. Okay, I've now got my perfect gloves with both the blue and the red. And while I've been collecting other orbs, I've influenced all my other gear. Right now, let's run some Maven for a couple of days and let's upgrade all this stuff. And while we're upgrading it, Maven's now where you get the Awakened Gems. I might get some cool Awakened Gems to further progress my character. I dig it. We'll have to wait and see, but I'm a big fan of it so far. And I like the fact we're running a militia, or Kirac is. Militias are fun. But yes, I'm Tarke. Have a great day. Let me know what you think of this new system. What are you most excited about? What, if anything, you're a little bit confused about or worried about? And yeah, see you in the next one for my thoughts on Archnemesis League and the patch notes. Bye-bye.